All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. All those who are watching on TV, YouTube, whatever else channels, MSNBC, Fox, whoever else wants to run this.
I wish.
And thanks for the turnout. I hope you all came armed with questions because this is a forum. It's not really a debate, although we've seen them turn into debates on occasion. I'll start out with a couple of questions, but to begin with, Stan and Teresa, welcome. Thank you for both showing up.
Thank you.
We flipped a coin beforehand. Stan won and elected to go second in the opening statements. So, Teresa, you can start out.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. I'm running for Selectmen because I really want to see a change in what has been. The community is very important to me. I've put in hundreds of hours volunteering for different events around town, trying to build community. And besides that, I've worked for 6 years for Bolton Access TV and watched not only the Selectmen and the town meetings, but all of the meetings that we record, advisory, planning, conservation, Tri-Town, school committee. So it's been a very learning process about how the town works and what sort of issues it's facing and how they've been dealt with in the past. And I think that we really need to appreciate all the different opinions in town and make room for them and allow them to express themselves and really come to terms with that we have different opinions and that we need to still respect each other even if we disagree.
All right. Stan.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Stan Wysocki. I'm currently chairman of the board of Selectmen here in Bolton. Thank you all for coming here tonight. Many of you in the audience I've talked with and have interacted with for many, many years, but just a little history. We moved into town in 1989. My son Christopher has gone through the school system and graduated a number of years ago. And we're very proud that he is now working for J.P. Morgan in New York City, and he will be taking care of me and Iva in our old age. So that's, looking forward to that. But just as background, I've been doing this a long time. I have served the town for right now 18 years. I first started my involvement in town government on the planning board, where I thought it was important to get some experience in terms of interacting with the various departments of the town. I was on the planning board for 4 years. I then ran for selectman and was selectman for a 3-year term. In between, I was on the advisory committee for 2 years, and then for the past 9 years, I have been your selectman continuously. So it's been a privilege and an honor for me to serve the town in those various capacities, especially as selectman for the last dozen or so years. I think over that time, and I think what's really important here is the notion of experience. As I said, I've been involved in town government for quite a long period of time, and I've gotten involved in and have worked with, and I believe have gotten the respect of the various departments in town, the department heads, especially the police department and the DPW department. As you know, we've had a change in the guard at both the school committee. I think we have some new and very excellent members of the school committee, and I've worked very closely with Lorraine Ramasco and Neil Darcy over the course of their involvement. And as you know, we have a new superintendent, Brooke Clenchy, which joined the district back in June, July of last year. And even though she's been there for a very short period of time, Brooke and I have worked quite a bit on a number of initiatives and issues. So I think having a very good relationship with the various boards and committees is important. In terms of my history, on the planning board, I worked very closely with developing and strengthening a number of the bylaws in town during that period of time. And I did have the pleasure of working with the library trustees in the development and eventual realization of this new facility here, and as well as working on the public safety committee that got us the new public safety building a few years ago. So I think that's very, very important. And I think, tonight I'm sure everyone will be asking a lot of questions, and I think in terms of priorities, obviously the town budget is very important. I think we've worked very, very hard, and certainly in cooperation with the advisory committee in the last few years with Brad Cody, that we've worked to make sure that we have streamlined the budget as best as we can. I think proof positive is a small increase in the non-educational portion of the budget this year of 0.6%. I think when we discuss and get to final questions in terms of initiatives, in terms of helping to ease some of the tax burden and bringing in some initiatives, we'll be able to talk about that. I also want to talk about, and hopefully we'll have some questions in terms of schools and capital projects, and then also preserving the rural character of Bolton, and also bringing in some smart business into the town of Bolton. So I look forward to hearing your questions tonight, and certainly welcome the opportunity to answer them. Thank you.
All right, thanks to both of you. So I'll ask a question to start off, and while everybody in the audience is preparing their questions. Just to give both of you a chance, what would be your top 2 or 3 priorities for your term on the Board of Selectmen? Teresa?
So the residential tax rate is always on top of everybody's mind. I mean, it breaks my heart when I hear about one of our elderly residents who can no longer afford to live in Bolton. I mean, it's just wrong. And so the tax rate needs to be looked at. The advisory committee does an amazing job going line by line and keeping us from going out of control, but we need to figure out something else. We need to explore other opportunities. We do have one tax base here, one tax rate here in Bolton. A lot of towns have a 2-tiered tax rate. There are ways to protect farms and still do that. But the question is, how much land would we need to devote to business in order for it to make a difference? And that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see those ideas being explored and figure out exactly whether they work or not, or whether or not we want that to happen. And then there's other ideas. Other towns are doing a better job than us, so let's look at other towns and see what they're doing that we're not doing, or we could do better. Because we're doing everything we can, and yet we're still in the same position. We're still level funding, and year after year, at some point, there's going to be a breaking point for that. Another big priority for me, of course, is open space, our rural character. I think that's really, it's what most of us moved here to Bolton for, is what we look like. And we need to maintain that. Our master plan says that in order to do that, we need to buy land. But again, you're getting into, if you buy land, then you're raising taxes potentially. So I think we really need to look at other opportunities to maintain our rural character and really make the most out of our rural character. It definitely is a selling point and why we're here.
Dan?
Yes, thank you. I think we all share many of the same goals and priorities, and certainly town budget is one of them. And we have worked very hard to minimize increases in the town budget. I think there are ways that we can look at to bring in, and to be perfectly honest, we have very, very limited avenues to pursue additional revenue sources in town. And when we get into the more of the nitty-gritty questions, I have a few that we can discuss and bring up. I think, and certainly talking with Brad Cody, who's the chairman of the advisory committee, I think one of the things relative to the town budget is I think we need to really look at and take a much longer view of the capital requirements that we have in town, and not necessarily look at individual items as an individual item. The other day we approved, although it still has to get to the ballot vote, approving to spend $195,000 on the town common. Certainly an excellent use of money. But obviously there are other things that may be coming up. Fortunately, at least for the town of Bolton, I think the majority of the short, medium-term capital projects are done. We have the library expansion, we have the public safety building, and I'm not necessarily seeing anything on the horizon in terms of the capital but obviously we need to look at additional sources of potential revenue. But getting back to the longer term vision, we do have in town right now, actually we just passed one this past Monday, we sort of have two accounts that are sort of earmarked for very specific things. One is the ambulance receipts account, where money that's obtained when our ambulance crew transports someone to a hospital, that money gets deposited in that account. And that account is only used for certain very specific things. One, during budget time, we allocate some amount of dollars out of that account to help balance the EMS portion of the budget. And I believe this year it was somewhere between $75,000 and $90,000. The other major thing that is used for, and solely used for, is the purchase of a new ambulance. So every 5, 6, or 7 years, the EMS group purchases a new ambulance, and that's no money coming out of your pocket goes to that. It's all coming from the ambulance receipts account. This past Monday at town meeting, one of the articles we passed was basically, I would call, for lack of a better term, a stabilization fund for the sewage treatment plant. We have a sewage treatment plant that was built 8 or 9 years ago that services Florence Sawyer School and Emerson School, as well as we've also tied in this building as well as the public safety building into that for the, instead of a septic system here. And DEP, if this were a private entity, would recommend that we have sort of an account where we're keeping a balance in for repairs on that. And as you know, one of the other things that we voted on at town meeting was we had to effect some repairs to that wastewater treatment plant, and we appropriated some money to do that. But this fund, we encumbered $70,000 that's put in there, and then each year we will probably come back at town meeting and add another $10,000. But at least that's starting to set aside some money for the eventual either repair or when the life expectancy of that plant is up in the next 10 or 11 years and we have to replace it or do effectively the repair, we have some of the money. And I think we need to look at perhaps maybe creating another 1 or 2 or 3 of those kinds of accounts where we're looking at something where we have an expense 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 years into the future, and maybe we save a couple of bucks for that. Maybe not the entire thing, but at least it will cushion the burden for when we actually have to spend that money. So that's one thing. Certainly, rural character, preserving rural character is important. And also balancing the commercial development that's in town. And certainly I would imagine there'll be some questions we can get more in detail with that. And I think also is schools and capital projects that are related to the schools. As I said, I think we have a new beginning with a new school committee and a new superintendent. And I see a much renewed partnership between the town of Bolton and certainly Stowe and Lancaster and the district in regards to increasing the educational excellence that we have in the town, which also will help in terms of valuation and tax rates and everything else. But we also have to be mindful of the fact that a few years ago there was an initiative to look at the science labs, which the town decided not to, actually 3 towns decided not to move forward with. But it's coming up again, and quite frankly, we're going to be losing accreditation if we don't do something with the science labs. And we're looking at a possible bill between 10, 11, $12 million, and it's something we're going to have to do. So we have to figure out creative ways to come up with some additional revenue streams, but we still have to maintain the educational excellence, and that's another priority I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. All right, I'm going to throw it out to the audience. You guys have had plenty of time to think, so fire away.
Yeah.
You had your hand.
Thank you. My name is Charlotte Johnston, Hudson Road. In full disclosure, I'm one of your assessors.
So what's your answer?
This question actually is for Teresa. I noted, got your postcard, and you've reiterated here, read in the last issue of the paper, in which you reiterated here on regarding the split rate. And there is no town with less than 20% commercial that it has a split rate. We currently have 5.3%. So kind of a two-pronged question here. What 15% of the town do you want to rezone? Because that's what's going to be required. And the second part of that question is, are you aware that the farming community, under a split rate, becomes taxed at the commercial rate?
So I'm so glad you asked this. I'm sorry, you're
I'm
finished?
almost done.
Okay.
They're taxed at the commercial rate, and that their taxes theoretically could double. We did some work. One of the things you don't, one of the things you did film, but I'm not sure if you watched it, was the hearing that we had to put on with the Selectmen, and that commercial properties could double. With only a 50% rate increase, the relief to residential would amount to 28 cents.
That's what we presently have.
That is what we presently have.
Right.
So,
So was this a selectmen meeting?
yeah, you probably have this in your file.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at the Selectmen's meeting was held on November 3rd. It has been held every year. I've been here for 40 years, so that's 39 before this.
Right.
November 3rd was the tax classification hearing, and we have to have one every year with the Selectmen. So this data was brought forth, but what wasn't made clear, and that would concern a lot of people, and maybe you, because I noticed in the paper you had, that you do some farming in.
Mhm.
Are you getting to a question here soon, Charlotte?
That's the question. The two parts of that question, were you aware of the fact that the farming and agricultural becomes taxed at the commercial rate? And that in order to do this at all, we would require 15% of the town being rezoned as commercial. And we are at 5.3% right now with 40% vacancy.
Right. So yes, I was aware. However, there's lots of people in this town who have lots of opinions about what we should do. And so I don't know that it's my decision whether or not we have more business owners. But I think having that education to our community is really important. I don't think the people out there understand that. So personally, no, I would not want to add 15% of our land to business. However, I think that needs to be made clear, and to find out if our community would want to do that. We have to do something. The residential tax rate needs to come down or be. No one should have to move out because they can't afford to live here. So this is just one example of, let's explore it and let's make sure everybody understands why it is the way it is and what would happen if we tried to change it, and find out if they want to. So I'm trying to remember the other part of your question. So, the agriculture. So I've been sort of looking around, and I'm definitely not an authority on it, but other towns do have a system by which they classify what the land is. And so agricultural land is taxed differently than business land. It's not a one-sided thing.
No.
It's a Department of Revenue requirement.
What I'm referring here is regulations that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts put forth. We don't have the ability to be able to start doing third rates.
So they don't do it by the tier, by different rates. They do it by classifying the land. So they're not
agricultural and industrial, agricultural and farming, as everyone who's out there with 61A, becomes taxed at the commercial rate.
If you were to have a two-tier tax rate, is what you're saying.
So then maybe it's not an option.
I hope not.
Well, that's what, but the kicker is that this information, I mean, I'm watching the meetings and I don't necessarily know this information as obviously as thoroughly as you do, although I get it, but I also get that the community needs to understand that that's the choice we're making. It's not good enough just to say, this won't work, but to educate the community as to why, because they need to understand how to pay their tax bills.
Okay. This session's been brought to you by the tax assessors.
Yes. I think it's a good thing.
Which is a free sponsorship.
We
Love you anyway.
Well, thank you ever so much.
Brad?
You seem to imply, I mean, you kicked off your opening statement by saying that you're, unless I misunderstood, that you're supportive of a two-tier tax rate. So is that one of your platform issues, and now that we realize that it can't happen, are you gonna take that off, or where are you on?
I'm saying that it's not one of my platforms. It is a suggestion that we need to look at, because that's what people are coming up to me and asking me why not. We need to get more of the community involved so they don't feel like we're not doing anything. The town government works so hard. I know. I watch you guys. I watch all the meetings. But it's not getting back to the community to understand why we're in the position we're in and what sort of choices we can make to change how it is.
Well, it's rather simple. There's a function of how much money we have versus what we need to spend to pay for the stuff. And we have more stuff that we have to spend on than we have coming in the door. And until you figure out a way to have more revenue come in and buy less stuff, the tax rate is going to remain the same. Now, it's gone down a little bit. These guys are the better experts than I, but it's a function of the real estate has slightly popped, and therefore our tax bill, our rate has gone down. But writing a check for 10 grand is the same damn thing as writing a check for 10 grand, doesn't matter what the tax rate is. All of that is being felt by these people. However, there's also a continual focus on making sure we spend, I mean, there wasn't even a speed bump Monday night. It was a yes on 34 articles, and we were done in 2.5 hours.
All right, I'm put a stop to this because we're going back to town meeting and not candidate forum. So Teresa's been on the hot seat. Somebody want to stay on the hot seat? Karen?
So I think, Karen Regan, 43 Bolton's Way, Teresa's platform and whether this tax rate wouldn't work, but the idea that we're looking at creative alternatives is refreshing to me. So my question for Stan would be, you had mentioned in your opening statement that you have explored creative ideas for bringing revenue in town. And I'd wonder if you could share with us what some of those ideas were.
Sure. And not to beat the tax rate down, but Brad's correct. I mean, the tax rate's a manufactured number. So this past budget season and at town meeting, we had to raise $23 million in taxes. And I forget what the estimated tax might be, $20.61. Let's just say $20 per thousand. Even if our tax rate were $10 per thousand, you'd be writing the same check for the same amount of taxes, because it doesn't matter whether it's $10 per thousand or $20 per thousand, we still have to raise $23 million. And the tax rate is sort of calculated, and everyone, as assessment, then pays their fair share of that. So the way you reduce your tax rate is either by finding tremendous sources of revenue to bring in, or you figure out a way to raise the valuation of the town, the overall town, as well as the assessed rate on everyone's property. That's how that happens. But even if you do, say we magically doubled everyone's assessed value, we went from 20 to 10 bucks per thousand, you'd still be paying the same taxes. The one benefit of that is that when you go to sell your home, if you need to move or you want to retire, you get a higher price for your home because the assessed value of your home is higher. So, but we'll finish with the tax rate. As far as looking at creative ways, the town of Bolton is very, very limited in terms of being able to generate additional sources of revenue. Now, we've done a couple of things. We have a couple of cell towers where we've leased space to carriers, and we're leasing that, and we get some revenue for that. And that's declining over time. A number of years ago, on 2 occasions, the town, different groups brought forth to the town the Community Preservation Act, or CPA. And for a variety of reasons, which we won't go into tonight, I mean, both of those occasions, the town decided not to go for that. Part of the issue was with CPA is that the state, with real estate transactions, develops a pool of money, and then they allocate that to the towns that participate. But it's kind of a matching sort of a thing where if you want to get whatever from the state, you've got to kick in an equivalent amount, which means unfortunately you've got to hike your taxes. And I think that was sort of put the kibosh on that. But surrounding towns like Stowe, have participated in the CPA program for quite a number of years, and they have. Yes, they did. They bite the bullet, and again, my earlier conversation about saving, where okay, we're raising a little bit, but we're going to set it aside for certain things. They've gotten in excess of over $1 million, maybe $2 million from that program over the years. Now that money can be used for a variety of things. Some of it is for historical preservation or improvements, and one perfect example is that last year at annual town meeting, we approved an article to spend $325,000 to repair and replace the portico, basically the columns and the nice facade that's in front of the town hall. CPA money could have been used to do that as opposed to taking it from free cash or whatever we did to borrow it. So that's one example, and I think we should probably look at that again and see whether or not it makes sense to do that. The other thing which we brought forth and was rejected at town meeting was the slight increase in the tax for alcohol and prepared food from a restaurant or a Subway or those kinds of things. I think for a $100 meal, it's like another 45 cents or something like that, and for something minuscule, it's only a couple of cents. So that might be something we want to look at. And at the time, there was some concern that, well, not many towns had adopted that, and people would bypass the establishments in Bolton because they had to pay that slightly extra bit of tax. Now, my wife works for a web development company. They do websites for commercial entities, and I've also checked on the internet. Probably 60 or perhaps almost 70% of all the towns in cities and towns in Massachusetts have adopted that. So it's not a case that it's still something that's not being favored. The majority of the cities and towns in Massachusetts have adopted that slightly extra tax. Now, in and of itself, because of the number of establishments we have in town, it's not going to amount to much. But it will amount to a little bit, which we can apportion to something. The same thing with business development. To Charlotte's point, you would need a tremendous amount of increased additional business development to offset the tax rate or the taxes in town. And we do have an issue of the Paragon Communications Building, the Condyne Office Park, Cobham, which is now vacant, the Skinner property, which has not been sold. Some of those properties have 40–50% occupancy. We need to get the occupancy of those buildings up and make them more attractive to businesses to come in, which will help bring in a little more tax revenue. And we don't have a lot of land that's zoned commercial or business development. And I think, you have heard in the past, people do not want fast food. They do not want big box retailers. And we've had other projects in the past where the voters have said no. But, it's kind of a, you don't want this, but there's a consequence for not wanting this, and now you have to deal with that. So I think, in some regards, maybe doing a little bit of smart business development, finding some ways to help those businesses get additional tenants, we can help a little bit. But I don't think there's going to be anything that's going to be a magic bullet that's going to dramatically reduce the tax rate or the taxes in town. I did a little calculation, and I may be off because I'm just doing rough.
And you're running out of time too, so.
Yeah.
So I mean, to reduce the tax burden by 10% we would have to bring in the equivalent of businesses that would be assessed at a value of about $115 million. For a 1% increase, 1% reduction, that's $11.5 million. That's the international. You would need 10 internationals in this town to reduce your taxes by 10%, roughly, plus or minus. So, I mean, it's a huge amount of business you need to bring in. So we're kind of stuck with where we are. We're all paying for the fact that we have a nice rural community and we don't have a lot of business, but that's the price we're paying. But there are certain things we can do to help a little bit here and there to make the town more attractive and also to increase the valuation of the town, which will increase the assessed value of your property.
All right. I'm going to ask you guys to keep your answers a little bit shorter.
I'll do
So
my
we can
best.
get,
I got a list.
don't dump everything from your head, Stan. Let's see, I had some, go ahead.
Yes. Donna Beninati, Main Street. This is from Mr. Wysocki. I've heard you speak a lot about the years of experience and all the work that you have done in the past, and I also hear you talk about the many things that we can't do, and a lot, how hard it is, and and just how difficult. I think I'd like to understand a little bit, if you were able to think outside the box and think about creatively, what could you offer to the town of Bolton in terms of helping to reduce our tax rate?
Well, it's not really a function of being creative and to think out of the box to do it. We are subject to a tremendous amount of regulation by the state. And there may be lots of things we'd love to do, but we're not allowed to do those. And, the things that I mentioned, reevaluating CPA, maybe changing the alcohol and prepared food taxes. Those are only a few of the things that we are allowed as a town to do. I mean, we could think creatively out of the box all day long, but the state's not going to allow us to do that. So I think, keeping a lid on expenses in the town is paramount. And I think we've done a very good job of that. I mean, last year we had a 0.8% increase in the non-educational budget of the town of Bolton. And this year was even less at 0.6%, which was about $139,000 out of a $23 million budget. That's not bad. But unfortunately, we are stuck and bound by state regulation. We do not have the ability to think out of the box and just go ahead and do these things, which is unfortunate. I wish we had more opportunities for revenue generation, but this is where we're at. One of the big factors that determines the taxes and the tax rate is what we have to pay to the schools. And right now, that's at 62.77%. And I think it's important that we continue to fund the schools because that has a tremendous impact on the viability of the town, the valuation of the town, and how well people are going to do in terms of their assessed values. So I wish I had a magic bullet, but there are very few things we can do relative to that in terms of being creative to generate additional sources of revenue.
Teresa, anything you want to add to that question you want to say? You don't have to, just give me a chance.
I think that other towns are somehow seemingly keeping the residential tax rate down. And we're not. I think there are potentially things we could learn from how other towns are doing it. And I think Ms. Rasaki is right, that there's no magic bullet. But I think that, like he said, there could be incremental things that we do and get behind to really make it different than it is.
Okay. You had your hand up earlier, so I'm going to go to you next.
Okay. Cindy Jakewith from Kettle Hole Road. I was just, with all due respect to Mr. Cody and Mr. Wasaki, I do feel and Teresa just sort of said what I was going to say, is that there are, again, all the towns are subject to the same state regulations. You keep bringing that up, and it's like that all towns are subject to these regulations that you're referring to. And I've lived in other towns where my home value was more than the home I have here on Kettle Hill, worth more money, and my taxes were less. For example, in Carlisle. And Carlisle's a very small rural town, not so different from Bolton. I don't know how they're doing it. I'm not privy to it. I just know that somehow it's different, and I don't know how. They don't have a lot of business. They don't have an international in Carlisle. They don't have that kind of stuff, but yet they are having, and I know because our taxes were less, and our house was more money. So I don't know how it's happening, but I just know that right now, you've been in a selectman for many, many years, nothing's changing, and I don't know if there's a reason, and a reason why, and I don't know what Teresa can offer, but I know that she's working in the way of what I like that I hear her saying is that she's willing to listen to people, to put out options. The town is changing. Years ago, they might have voted this down or they might have voted that down. If you guys wanted to vote, for instance, a Be Good. A Be Good is a fast food place. I would vote for it. I would love to have a Be Good in town. I think that's an awesome natural food, fast food
All right,
place.
do you have a question? I just wanted that folks
The
were here to ask
question is-
questions.
the question is
We're not,
why-
this is not a platform for people to,
It's-
everybody to
okay.
express their own
I didn't mean
point of
to get off
view.
into that,
This is
but
to hear from these two guys,
It's like
so.
we've been listening
no,
to
just
that for
wait
a
just a
while,
second.
and I just would like him to be able to respond to that. Is there, again, are you gonna do what Teresa is saying, and are you willing to look into other options? Consider grants. Is there other things that you could do?
Well, grants will have no effect on your taxes. I mean, grants are there if there is a project that we're
But there
entertaining.
are grants, though, that the town voted on. I mean, there are things we voted on in the town meeting that could have been perhaps grant-based. I don't know.
No, we have an excellent town administrator who really scours and looks at what possible grants there might be available for any particular project. In some cases, grants are determined based upon the wealth of the town, and we don't get them. Grant opportunities, it used to be grants were much more voluminous, and the grant opportunities are shrinking. We actually applied for a grant for the redevelopment of the intersection of 117 and 110. Because that was the first time we applied for that particular grant, we didn't get it. And the granting authority said, probably, you're going to have to do this 2 or 3 or 4 times before you're going to actually get the grant to actually get the work done. Now, the grant was awarded to Stowe for similar work. But even with that grant, we had to kick in $100,000 of Chapter 90 money, which means that there's $100,000 less available for maintaining the other roads in town. So it's sort of, catch as catch can. But again, as I said before, whether the tax rate is $20 per thousand or $10 per thousand, you're still going to be paying the same amount in terms of taxes. And I can't comment on Carlisle because I do not know what has transpired in the past, what they have spent in terms of capital projects, what their debt load is.
They have a
or
new
what their
school
business-
and they have a new high school.
So I
They have to admit that,
I
just
can't
like you.
comment. But we have, not only myself, but also Don Lowe, who we've had here for the last 8 years, who is constantly scouring and looking for grant opportunities when it's possible to do in terms of capital project. There aren't grant opportunities to be applied to buying a $100,000 DPW truck, for instance.
But are you basically saying then there's no hope, this is it?
I'm not saying there's no hope.
Okay.
Not at all. Not at all. But, we have chosen to have, as our assessor said, an environment where we have only 5% business. If you want to have more business in town, then we can certainly increase that to the extent that we can. And if we get to a certain level, as you said, most towns who have less than 20% don't have a 2-tier tax rate. If you want to invite and try to build up and we have 20% business in town where we can entertain a 2-tier tax rate, that's fine. But I have heard over the years by many citizens that they want to have a small town, rural character, as little business as possible, as little in terms of fast food, those kinds of businesses. So we're playing a trade-off here. We're playing a trade-off.
Okay, all right, I'm going to say it again. Can't ask your question in about 15 seconds, then sit on your hands. No more statements, no more badgering. Just, let's give these guys an opportunity to say what's on their mind. Stan has a lot on his mind, so does Teresa. So can we have something for Teresa so we have some balance here? Martha, only if you're going to help with the balance.
Martha Remington, yes, I just wanted to mention to both existing selectmen and prospective selectmen candidates that we need to remind that 5% of business in our town that they're getting a big advantage by having a single tax rate, and they can help by donating to other things in town, because they really do have a big advantage.
Is that a question?
You
guys, I'm surprised we only have 2 candidates for selectmen. Because all of you seem to have a good idea, so I don't know why the hell you're not. So, all right, we've had a lot of women, so male question.
Oh, I have a question.
Ouch.
First of all, I'd
Please.
like to thank both candidates for the willingness to serve. That's it, I have a question for Teresa.
Can you
say
what
I'm
your
sorry,
name and
David
where
Kell
you live?
Canning, Old Bay Road,
Thank you.
225 Old Bay Road. So I have a question for Teresa. Obviously, an important part, if not arguably the most important part of the responsibility of the selectmen is the management of the budget. The lion's share of town discourse is all about the budget with this conversation tonight. Our 2 newest selectmen, when they took office, had very little, if any, experience in managing the budget. And we're seeing how that is playing out today. If we had a 3rd selectman, Teresa, who was also inexperienced, it could be catastrophic. So the question I have for you is, help me understand how your past endeavors qualify you to manage a $23 million budget.
So, from what I've seen, the advisory handles and the assessors handle the budget. They advise the selectmen about it, but the majority of the conversation happens through capital planning and through advisory meetings within that committee. And then they make recommendations to the selectmen. Now, unless there's a whole part of the selectman job that doesn't get filmed and doesn't happen in selectmen meetings, you guys can shake your head, but
It's very difficult for you to answer if you don't understand the responsibility of the position. The other question, or the other issue I have, the comment I have, I'm sorry, I have a comment, is that I think that right now is the wrong time for the town of Bolton.
No, that's, I'm going to stop you there.
Wait.
This is not the place to.
Well, this is part of the answer. Part of the question.
No, it's not. No, I'm not, guys.
But I didn't get an answer.
Endorsements or detractions from the field, I want questions. You can ask pointed questions, but this is
Did I have an
veering
answer?
too far into personal opinion, and I'm not going to allow it. So if you feel you need to express a personal opinion, go outside and express it to your friends, but not in here.
Mr. Platt, I did not get an answer to my question.
She answered, you may not like the answer, but I believe she answered your question. I'm going to move on. Bert?
Okay, Bert Schnitzler, Meadow Road. Simple question for Teresa. Since you announced, have you met with any of the department heads within the town? And what were the results of those meetings? And also, have you contacted the Mass Ethics Committee to discuss what your position will be with VATCO should you be elected to selectmen?
so no, I have not met with any of the heads of any of the committees. I was not advised to do so, and I'm not sure why. I have working relationships with all the committee members, but no, I did not.
More the department heads, with Dawn, with the chief, with Harold, with the assessors, to try to understand what they do and how you could help them as a selectman.
I think I have a pretty good handle on what most of them do. And I'm really looking forward to working with the groups that I don't know as much about what they do. And I have been in touch with the Ethics Committee, and there is a non-issue. There's a form I have to fill out and disclose the fact that I work for Bolton Access TV, and obviously I would recuse myself if anything about Bolton Access TV came in front of the Board of Selectmen.
And obviously you won't do things like edit meeting tapes and things like that.
Come on.
No, I'm sorry. No, but I mean, when you put them on now, and there is, I'm not saying we cut out anything, but you'll have other people film them.
What is that? What's the question exactly?
Okay.
Yes.
Mary Chimo, Corn Road. One of the issues that is a concern of mine is the lack of diversity of housing in town and also of affordable housing. We have the Bolton Country Manor, which is a senior housing complex. Right now, the waiting period is about 16 months to get in. There have been a few Bolton residents who had to leave their homes in Bolton and put their name in for the Country Manor, but unfortunately the wait was too long and they had to move on. And these are people who have lived in town all their lives. We have 3 proposed residential developments right now in negotiations with planning. 2 of them are going to be large single-family homes. The other one is, they're still working on how to do it. One of the ways we could lower taxes would be by building smaller units so that you're not bringing a lot of children to tax the school system. But regardless, how can we make living in Bolton more affordable for people who can't afford $500,000 and over, and other options of housing in town? For either of you.
Good. Who wants to take that first?
Short
answers.
Short answers. Well, it's the responsibility primarily of the planning board to be dealing with developers and providing those suggestions, number one. Secondly, to my knowledge, there have not been a tremendous rush of developers who want to come in to build lower priced homes or do affordable projects of 40Bs. I mean, there's obviously a hurdle, and certainly, you know, we do encourage that. And when I was on the planning board, you know, we entertained a number of those projects, but that was a long time ago when I was on the planning board. As far as affordability, you know, because of the formulas that are developed on the median income or whatever, we've had issues even now, and we get involved because not only the selectmen and the housing authority and the Affordable Housing Trust sort of have a joint responsibility, you know, in terms of people who, say, at Bolton Woods Way, who have an affordable unit and are looking to move. We're having tremendous difficulty finding someone who can qualify because of the formulas that are imposed on us relative to what the calculations are for someone who can be able to buy that home. And I certainly certainly been a proponent of affordable housing. Many people probably won't remember, but years ago when I was on the planning board, when I was chairman, I spearheaded, I'm not even sure if it's still on the books or not because there might have been a sunset clause, but we added something called the inclusionary housing bylaw, which for subdivision, actually it's still on it because we made a modification to it at town meeting, where for a subdivision, you know, the developer had to include some amount of affordability in that, either in terms of based upon a calculation of the number of housing lots, or to donate a lot, or to have in lieu of that set aside some money. And I believe now that my old brain is working, we changed that formula from, let's say, a flat $200,000 in lieu of a lot to make it float based upon, I think you might have commented, or someone might have commented on that, based upon market rates. And that was something I spearheaded. So we are looking at those things, but it does take a developer who wants to come in to do that, and the developer does take a hit, relative to the affordable units. We had an opportunity, I believe it was something off of Sugar Road, where Habitat for Humanity wanted to come in, and in order to make it affordable, they wanted to build basically a duplex, a two-family home, but make it look like an affordable home. And I was all in favor of that, but there was a lot of opposition from the residents of having that type of duplex unit on a single family. So, we're having that problem, but, we certainly want it. I know the planning board is looking at that. The planning board is also looking at some cottage overlay options to make the home smaller, to your point. We also had an opportunity to put an apartment complex next to Colonial Candies, which would have been 1 or 2 bedroom homes, young folks, fewer kids, less burdens on the school, and the townspeople didn't want that either. So, it's not necessarily just not the will of the town or the will of the officials. You have a whole bunch of people in town who may or may not necessarily think the same way, unfortunately.
Teresa, do you want?
So I would agree, and I think that that's one of the places we could do better, is to educate the community as to what we're really deciding. Not having affordable housing is not good for Bolton in the long run. And so I think that the opposition potentially doesn't necessarily have all the facts when they're making their decisions. We have really tough decisions to make to hold on to the rural character and yet provide a more diverse housing within the community.
So Teresa, we don't really know a whole lot about you. So I guess my question is, we've seen you on Bolton Access TV. It sounds like you haven't done a $23 million budget, but if you do it an order of magnitude less, a $2 million budget, can you give us just give experience about where you've led a team of people, where you've motivated a team, where you've dealt with crisis in another situation that would help us better understand your experience to come to the table with the selectmen, just so we can learn more about you.
What's your name and street?
Oh, John Tremblay, Longville Road.
So, no, I don't have a huge financial background. That's definitely for sure. I do see what happens with advisory and have followed how they go about their decisions and their line by line, and been in front of an advisory. I'm on the AgCom as well as the Cultural Council. Having to show them what our budgets are and what we're doing with them. And they're doing a fabulous job doing that. What I do have is a tremendous experience dealing with the entire community and hearing and being able to bring back to the Selectmen Board the variety of people's ideas and the issues that are bothering them and where we need to focus and what's missing. I mean, even within the boards and the selectmen, there's not necessarily great communication. You wouldn't know that if you didn't see all the meetings. And so I actually have a degree in wildlife biology. I spent 5 years working in remote locations in bear country, in very serious conditions that were a matter of life and death. And I'm not sure that is needed on the select board, but I don't think it's a bad thing. Although some of these questions, maybe it is.
So maybe on the Ag Commission, so if you're on the Ag Commission, is there a crisis that happened where you had to provide leadership or you had to motivate to do something different? Just some concrete examples where maybe you have been involved that we could actually, because a lot of us just don't know you, right? And there's this unknown that we're trying to understand how you're going to fit into this pretty big role.
Well, that's what I think me and you shared, the local zoning board meetings and what happened with 401 Main and what's still happening with 401 Main. And, my responsibility there was to be chair of the AgCom and to support farming in Bolton. And also hear what you guys had to say and understand that, this is your neighborhood and your concerns. And so I think that there's lots of those sort of examples in my past, working, Bolton Access TV. I work with all kind of people and am very proud of what has happened there, and that it has become a real asset to this community. I think my strong point is working with people and appreciating that everybody has a different perspective. And those perspectives don't make them wrong and they don't make me right. But respecting each other and that we have different ideas can actually be an incredible asset to this community. That we're able to hear each other and understand that we both care about the town, but we have different ideas of which direction it should go. And in doing that, come up with a compromise that we can both agree with.
Mr. Moderator?
Yeah, sure.
Comment on one of the things that Teresa said in terms of communication between boards and committees. I certainly can't speak for my two colleagues on the Board of Selectmen, but I, as a selectman for the past 12 years, I regularly communicate and have meetings with not only our town administrator, but all the department heads, including the DPW director and the head of chief of police. Regularly make phone calls to stop in to the public safety building. I stop in and talk to Harold at the DPW barn. I meet with the town clerk and other members of the town hall staff. So, you know, I do have the ability, obviously, I work from home, but I believe my other two colleagues do as well, and they can speak for themselves. But I don't think that there's any real issue in terms of at least my communication and our town administrator's communication with our various boards and committees. I think that's working very well. I think it's proven to be very beneficial for both sides.
Good, Kathy?
Yeah, Kathy Jones at Fox Run Road. I have a question for both you, but Teresa, I'm going to start with you because you and I spoke at the site walk at the Wilder Road culvert, and I was expressing my objections to the process because town meeting had unanimously voted last May for that to be done. And you told me that you thought the hard questions had not been asked. And I asked you what those were, and you told me the hard questions had not been asked. So I've not heard those articulated, but moreover, we wound up spending more money because of the taking longer to get to that. So given that the town is governed by the votes at annual town meeting, and it is the job, as I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm misunderstanding, it is the job of the selectmen to execute upon the votes as given by the voters at town meeting. How do you reconcile when you're sitting on the Board of Selectmen if you personally maybe disagree with a decision that was made at town meeting, and how do you uphold your responsibility as a selectman and still carry that out and reconcile those two things? So if you disagree as a selectman, if you disagree with the meeting, the vote at town meeting, but you're charged with implementing that, how do you reconcile if you personally disagree with that and still carry out the wishes of town meeting?
So I don't know that the decision at town meeting was ever disregarded or not carried out. It was delayed in order to get additional information that potentially could have saved the townspeople money. So I think it was.
More money. So you're saying.
I don't know that it cost us more money.
It's not what I'm asking. Do you think that's okay? Is that acceptable for the selectmen to, as you say, stall was the word you used, because there might be something different? How do you reconcile?
So there's a timing issue here. Mr. Keep was not a selectman when that decision was made.
I'm just saying.
So
I'm
his asking
you,
for additional information is not necessarily a bad thing. He was coming into it after the fact and requesting additional information. And my understanding is there was some information that wasn't available when they started asking questions. And so there was a process of getting more information.
So could you provide that?
What's that?
Are you aware of that? You taped all the meetings, as you pointed out, you've been at all the meetings. So it's possible I had missed a meeting where some of that information came out. Do you recall what that additional information might be? I'm not aware.
There was a engineering survey that hadn't been done.
I thought there were multiple that were done. Actually, my understanding is there were 2 additional ones that were ordered by the Board of Selectmen, as well as the plates, which were all 3 things that are additional expenses. Just save money by spending more. So I guess the answer that you're saying is you were okay with that. You think the selectmen can keep going?
So no, I don't know that I've made a judgment on it at all. What I'm
Okay.
saying is that I think there was a timeline issue about it, and I think that the overall point of the delay was actually to try to save us money. Potentially, I mean, you guys are disagreeing with me, shaking your head. Potentially that didn't happen, but that was the point of why it was held up. I don't believe that any of the selectmen ever didn't want the project to happen or didn't want to respect the town meeting vote. The question, the town meeting vote was about putting the money for that culvert. But the questions became, what was the proper way to go about the repair of the culvert? So there's sort of two different things.
My question to you is just how you reconcile the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen, as you would personally be a selectman, to implement what is voted at town meeting with if you have an opinion that differs with what was voted. I haven't heard an answer to that. So I guess I'm still asking the same question.
I maybe need to ask it different because I guess I'm not understanding.
Put aside the culvert issue.
Okay.
In general, if there was something voted at town meeting and passed at town meeting that you personally didn't agree with, and you're on the Board of Selectmen, how would you reconcile that disagreement that you have with the will of the town?
That's what I'm asking. Thank you.
Wouldn't that apply to all selectmen?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, no, right, I'd like Stan to
I'm not sure what I'm being asked.
I think she's asking, if you disagree with what happened at town meeting, would you act to undermine what was voted at town meeting?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
That's fine.
All right, I
That's
think
what-
that's the
what
question.
question was.
She opened up her question.
So it only took 2 interpretations to get Kathy's question.
I apologize.
All right, okay, wait, hold on a second. All right. So we're at 8, you guys have to be anywhere?
Nope.
All right, we'll keep going for a little while longer. Stan, do you want to answer the same question about, because it was addressed to both of you, so will you undermine town meeting?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, I think that in the situation that was presented, you know, our DPW director, Harold Brown, does what he always does, is a thorough job investigating all of the options and brings forth the best option for the town. He's the best option and the most economical option to the town. And, you know, in my view, it wasn't a case of there was missing information. It was a case of, you know, I don't know what the case was, but you know, we went and spent additional money, which was not necessary. And at the end of the day, we came to the same conclusion that we had started out with, which obviously facilitated the delay in getting the project done. And yes, there was an additional cost of almost $16,000 to put the plates down on the road, which are going to have to be ripped up when the culverts are done. And an additional, I think it was $3,600 or $3,700 for these structural engineering things, which were not necessary. So, you know, so we delayed the project a year, and we had to spend the extra money. And the $15,000 or $16,000 for the plates was done in lieu of having the district decide not to traverse the Wilder Road with the kids and having to reroute buses and having to rent vans, which would have been significantly more. So we picked the lesser of the 2 evils, but it was an additional expense. But I mean, I think, you know, the culvert itself was investigated and reviewed for several years before it was brought forth before town meeting. So I think the investigation and the analysis was done. We had an engineering firm. Those plans were approved by DEP, so, you know, that seemed to be okay with me, so.
You've been trying for a while to ask a question.
You know, I just
so-
wanted to, actually, you've had your hand up much longer. I think of Laura Roberts, Annie Moore Road. My question's for both of you, but largely for Mr. Wysocki, because I'm fairly new to town. I've been here, unfortunately, the last couple of years, where I've seen a lot of, in watching the YouTube videos, animosity, disrespect for our town officials, for our townspeople, for our committee chairs, from our committee chairs to townspeople in your meetings. And I hear you saying that you have a really good relationship with all of the department heads and the folks in town hall, which is great. But what I'm seeing when I'm watching these selectmen meetings just really turns me off as someone who's been here in town for a while, or not a while, for 2 years. And so that's, my question is, what are you going to do in the next 3 years? And Teresa, what do you feel like you can bring to us that would restore some respect and some civility in our town meetings? I want to be able to bring my children to a selectmen's meeting so that they can learn about town government. And I don't want to hear name calling and swearing and disrespect for people. I teach my children to behave better than that. So tell me, what will you bring in the next few years? What will you do to restore a sense of openness and ability to communicate with people? I see a lot of head shaking when Teresa speaks about new ideas, and so that's my question. What's going to change in the next 3 years?
Well, I think that's obviously a fairly complex question, and you know, I think you if you really watch those meetings, you know, you may understand a little bit better the gist of the genesis for where the contention lies. You know, when you have a situation where you have a selectman right out of the gate decide that it's better to go do a search for a police chief when you have a lieutenant that's been on the force for 23, 24 years and doesn't provide an explanation for that, and you have an individual who decides to vote against the retroactive pay for the police department, and you have an individual who refuses to vote for the chief of police contract, and you have a situation which we just described here earlier where you have some delay or undermining, or whatever you want to call it, for something that the town unanimously approved and was vetted for several years before it was brought forth before the town. And you have a situation where you have a town administrator's contract renewal that drags on for 3 months when it should have been taken care of in a meeting or two. You have certain issues where, you know, individuals, and obviously some of that is coming from me, where people's tempers get up, and it almost becomes incredible as to why these things are occurring. And so, you know, there is civility and politeness from both directions. And, you know, it comes to a point in time where you do have to express an opinion. And believe me, from my perspective, yes, I have raised my voice a little bit, but quite frankly, nothing where it should have been. So unfortunately, the individuals, the other individuals that might be directed this question, I don't believe are in this room. But I think you should go back and watch some of those meetings, and you should understand from where the disagreements occurred. And those were just but a few of them.
Teresa?
So I gotta say, I have to disagree with Mr. Wysocki on this one. I have been watching, and it's been embarrassing. I would like to bring that difference to the select board. I think that everybody deserves to be able to ask questions, to be able to be new, to be able to make mistakes or say something that's not the perfect answer. I think people shouldn't be afraid to speak out, allowed to have differences of opinion. There are at least a dozen people in this town who are voting for me who won't put a yard sign in their yard because they don't want pushback. And I think that's wrong. I think that we've gotten to a really unfortunate place, and I think we need to change it. And we need to open this town back up, that we're neighbors and we can respect each other even if we disagree about something. You're not wrong just because you got a different opinion than me. And I want to hear what you have to say. And I would really like to change selectmen meetings to include many more voices in this town.
Trying to look for somebody who hasn't asked a question, so. Bob, as long as it's not about the culvert.
I would just say, okay, thank you for calling on me, Richard, but anyone that has a question about the culvert, my phone number's in the book, call me, okay? And I will gladly email you the note that I sent to the selectmen, to Brownie, so you can truly understand the spirit in which I sent that. My question is, I'm embarrassed to say I've lived in this town for almost 28 years, and this is only the second such forum that I've been to. I haven't been to that many town meetings. Mr. Wysocki, I commend you on your 12 years in service. You must be crazy to run again, and Teresa, you must be crazier. But thank you, and the same with everyone else that serves on the town boards. What really motivated me, though, the other night was the last similar forum that I went to. We spent the night talking, and both of those parties are not selectmen at this point, but they spent all night talking about what we were doing to increase revenue. And finally I raised my hand and said, after spending all my life in the private sector, okay, the other side of that coin is, what do you do to reduce expense? And if I ever said to my boss when budget time came out, hey chief, I can't take any more out of it, I would have been gone. And if any of the people that reported to me had that attitude, they'd have a big problem. So my question to both of you is, okay, how willing are you to ask the difficult questions to the town managers? Everyone does a good job. Mr. Cody brought the point up at the meeting that, hey, we're looking at $1 million, okay? So let's talk about what we can do to raise revenue. I want to know, what hard questions are you going to ask of all the town managers, okay? What are you going to do? How about reducing cost? Okay, that's always a possibility. It's difficult, okay? And unfortunately, it may go counter to the go along to get along philosophy, but I think that this is what we're faced with. My wife and I are very fortunate we can pay our taxes, okay? I wrote that note thinking about the people in this town that can't, that have been here for 50 years or more. They've got value in their property, but unfortunately when they go to Shaw's, they have a bigger problem. So.
All right, we'll let Teresa start first, and then we'll go to Stan.
So I think that there has been a lot of pushback because Mr. Keep and Mr. Frayne are asking questions. And I think that you've hit it right on the head, that those questions need to be asked. And with all due respect to all the boards and to all the employees of the town, it should be the selectmen's job to ask those questions. And all the employees and all the boards, I mean, nobody tells Brad when they go to advisory that you can't ask me that. He gets to ask us whatever we want about our budgets. And we need to answer, and we need to be educated and understand, where he's coming from. And so I think that's true too for all the employees and all the board members, that they need to be held accountable for what they're doing. And thank you all for your service. There's no doubt about it. But you also need to step up and explain yourself.
Stan?
Yes, well, I think in terms of scrutinizing the budget and asking the department heads to where they can cut, that process has been going on and has continued for at least the last dozen or more years that I've been involved in it. I mean, every year, when the advisory committee meetings are actually joint meetings between the selectmen and the advisory committee during budget season. And I attend all of them. And even for the little budgets, we actually go through, as you went through in the town meeting, I mean, there's pages and pages and pages of the budget and various sub departments and sub line items. And we go through that every year, and we question each department head. Well, first of all, we ask them to come in with, and been for quite some time now, a level services budget where we're saying, do not provide any increases to what you had last year. And if you do come in with an increase, then you have to justify why. But we've gone through and we've said, can you take $100 out of this? Can you take $1,000 out of this? We looking at the run rates of what a particular line item has been at. Well, you know, you budgeted $6,000 last year, and right now you're only at, you know, $3,500 or $4,000, and you've got X number of months to go, or whatever it might be. Can you whittle it down a little bit more? And we've been doing that year after year after year. And unless there's some capital project, we haven't increased budgets. People haven't been spending money. People haven't been adding to their departments. So it's been a case that we've actually been whittling things down. And that is also reflected in the fact that when we come to the end of the fiscal year, and then in the fall, we get certified for what our free cash is, which, you know, replenishment of free cash is basically whatever you've had in the budget that you've allocated that you didn't spend gets returned back. And over the years, that amount of money that's been coming back from that portion has gone down consistently. We used to have a free cash after certification of $1.5 million, $2 million years ago. It's come way down now. I mean, at the end of the budget season, we would have still have lots of free cash. This year, I believe it was $3.25 or $3.50. So I mean, we're trying to wean ourselves off from that, and the replenishment is coming back much less. Now, we had a little bit more this year because we had some unexpected additional growth in the town in terms of tax revenue. But that replenishment is getting less and less and less each year, which is a testament to say that we are really honing the budget down to only spend the absolute minimum that we need to run the town. And anytime anybody comes in that says, I need to do this or I need to do this, there's a very big discussion and a tremendous amount of justification that's done to allow that to happen. And I don't think this year there was really much of anything that anyone came in for saying, I need to do this or I need that. That goes on every year. So I think for a testament of a $23 million budget where the town's portion of the non-educational piece only went up by $138,000, and the vast majority of that is either contractual stuff or cost of living kind of things or union stuff, which we have no control over, or health insurance. I think that's pretty damn good. It's pretty damn good.
All right. Yes, you have been waiting a while to ask a question.
Sharon Chappella from Warner Road. It's really interesting to me how much time we spend on money when, in fact, that is not what makes this town appealing to me. It's not why we live here. We've been here for over 40 years, but practically makes us need
Slade's might have a different opinion.
honestly, my taxes are not what make me love this place. They don't make me not love it, but that's not the big deal. What makes me really like this place is that it is a community. And a community is a group of people who don't snipe at each other, but who work together. And just I know I spoke at town meeting about what the trust has done to build a common. Didn't get a chance to mention all the wonderful people who put the idea of the common in our head first, so that we don't have a CVS there. I mean, it's all that working together that really, I think, is appealing to me, and we don't talk about it enough. And so I actually want to repeat a question that was asked a moment ago. I think in order to make the town work well, the Board of Selectmen have to work well. When Stan was asked, what would you do differently to make it more civil? He said, the people of Bolton elected folks I don't like. And I don't like their ideas, and that allows me to roll my eyes when they speak, and to speak in an embarrassingly derisive way to them and about them in public. So Stan, I really want to ask you, do you have some idea about how, if you were reelected, you would get along better with the people you voted for you to get along with?
I try very hard to work with everyone that's in a board or a committee. Very, very hard. And I don't think that the people of this town would have elected me to be part of that for 4 terms if I didn't. And I think my past civil service and the fact that I've been involved in town government for the last 18 years in a variety of capacities in different departments, planning, advisory, and selectmen. And the fact that I'm working, I believe, fairly well, and I think you can ask the department heads over that period of time what their opinions of me are. And I think I've worked very well, and I try very hard to be a good listener and try to respect people's opinions. Having said that, though, I mean, there comes a point in time where you're not always going to get along with everyone as best as you can. But I think the fact that I have served in this town for 18 years, and I believe I have a fairly good reputation with all the boards and committees in this town, that for the most part, I work well pretty much with everyone. So the thing is, you know, I think that question should also be asked of the other 2 gentlemen that you are directing it to me. It is a two-way street. It is definitely a two-way street. I think one of the telling things is, and thank God and knock wood, that our town administrator wasn't selected to move to Lancaster. And he certainly didn't do that because I don't get along with him. There were a lot of extenuating circumstances as to why he made the decision to apply for the job there. So I think it's some give and take that needs to be done. And I have to say there have been some I don't mind differing opinions and attitudes, but when those differing attitudes and opinions start to get personal, and they're out more to attack than to be just a different point of view. I think different point of views are great. That's what makes the town wonderful, and it brings different ideas. But when it gets to be nasty, when it gets to be pointed, when it gets to be personal, I'm not going to tolerate that. And neither should any of you. Civility works in 2 directions. And I think my history in the town and the work I've done proves that I can get along with pretty much anybody. So I think work certainly needs to be done and try to be as respectful as possible, but it's a two-way street.
Teresa, I'll give you a chance to if there's anything you want to add to what you said earlier on this similar question about civility on the selectmen.
I voted for Stan in the past too. He has been an amazing addition to this community. And I hope no matter what happens with this election, he continues to be that addition to this community. It would be really unfortunate if we lost his input into the future of Bolton.
Okay, I'm going to take 2 more questions. I'm going to go people who haven't asked questions. Penny, I'll let you go next.
This is for Teresa. Part of your platform is that you know a lot of people and you've heard a lot of ideas,
and you feel that there's an educational component to what people don't understand, i.e. you're not understanding the two-tier tax rate. Could you tell me what it seems like where you are now on BATCO is a wonderful platform to educating and bringing forth those ideas. Can you tell me what you've done since you've been involved from BATCO since nearly the get-go, not quite the get-go. What you've done to bring those ideas forward? Because it seems like you have a wonderful platform to do that. What have you done to bring those ideas forward?
So we've increased the number of meetings, the number of different meetings we do to make those available to the public at their leisure on the internet. Our internet is, our exposure on the internet is much larger than when I first came on. We also have amazing relationships with the schools, the principals at the high school, as well as those involved in the guidance people, basically. That we didn't have a relationship when I first came on there, or we had a damaged one, put it that way, and that's no longer the case. We got approval to record the graduation 4 years ago, I think. This will be our 4th year, creating a scholarship fund, which hasn't been set up yet, but the money is there to start a scholarship fund at the school through the sale of the graduation DVDs. So that's pretty exciting. The same with Florence Sawyer Television. We have a working, we work together and help make sure that what they do is available to the public as well.
So just to follow up, so what you brought to BATCO is just more televising of meetings. Have you brought any programming to it that would involve the community? Have you done any, programming by BATCO that would interview people and bring groups together who want to talk about ideas?
Sure, we do
that?
Yes, we do candidates night. We record almost all of the events that happen.
No, but those are other people's meetings. Have you done anything as BATCO on your own to?
So we had Nashoba now, which was the superintendent every month came in and did it, and I've been working with Brooke Clenchy since she came on. There's just been too many things going on. We haven't quite started it yet, but she's very interested in doing it.
So this is something you're going to be doing?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, we'll pick it back up. We did it for a long time with Michael before he left.
Okay, that was it. That was my
So
question.
we've also actually talked to the assessors. I know that they're interested in doing the program. It was a staff of 1 for a long time, and more recently we brought on 2 part-time people that are just amazing film students who have totally made the dynamics even better there, and we're more able to do more things. So we're actually in process of trying to figure out where to put our energy.
Thank you.
So we also have an ongoing series that nobody knows about yet, about the Common and about the history of it and what it went through to become what it is today. That hasn't been released yet.
Okay. All right, we're almost at 8:30. I'm going to go ahead and give the candidates a break and let them give their closing statements. Stan elected to go last. So what? Oh, that's right. You're last. So Stan, at least somebody knows what's going on.
Well, again, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. I certainly appreciate the fact that people have the interest in hearing what we have to say and take an interest in town government. We've talked about a lot of things tonight, but I think, from my perspective, one needs real experience in town government to be an effective leader and to navigate the complex mesh of state and local regulations and interpretation of state laws to be effective in the job. We're constantly being asked to weigh in on critical issues that affect the entire town. And I think I would like to continue to serve and make those responsible decisions for the town, but make them in regards to the entire town and not necessarily for one faction or another, because I think when you take this job, you have to leave your personal preferences and views behind. And you really have to adopt the hat of what is best for the entire town. And sometimes that involves making some compromises. But it's what's in the best interest of the town that really makes the difference. And certainly I appreciate you coming here and talking with us tonight, and hope you give me some consideration for me. Thank you very much.
Teresa?
So I think that this community is really the important part here. That everyone deserves to be respected for their opinions. Everyone deserves to be able to feel like they can voice their opinions. We need to allow for the other voices in this community, the other people who don't want to speak up because of the environment of the meetings at the moment. I have every respect for Mr. Wysocki. As I said, I voted for him in the past. But what's happening now needs to change, and we need some new ideas. We need more people to step up. We need to figure out how to get more people involved. There are really difficult choices that need to be made, and we need to have a discussion about what we want to do. And I think that I can bring something to the select board that is all about respecting each other, that's all about collaboration, it's all about figuring out what some of those answers can be. And I hope everybody votes on May 8th. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks to Stan and Teresa. Consider them both friends, and I admire both of them for running, and I wish you both the best. And for all in the room and everybody watching, you only get to complain if you vote. So,